Kia ora, welcome to Parliament TV. Over the next hour we present items from the TVNZ collection, from archives held by Ngā Taonga Sound and Vision, to remember the politics from our past.
In 1996, New Zealand held its first MMP, mixed member proportional, general election. 2 months out, Hone Edwards from the Marae program examines the Māori policies of the 4 major parties.
In 1977, protester Joe Hawke led his people of Ngāti Whātua through a land occupation at Bastion Point that lasted just over 500 days. Almost 2 decades later, and the protester, come question mark politician, has been selected as the Labour Party candidate to contest the Taitokero seat in the first MMP election. So it was here at his marae in Ōrākei that Labour leader Helen Clark and retiring MP for Western Māori Korowetere launched the Labour Party Māori Manifesto for election 96.
Let me state now our total opposition to the concept of the fiscal envelope and placing an arbitrary limit on the compensation from the Crown to Māori. I think it is outrageous to state in advance of determination of all the issues involved a fixed sum of money within which claims will be settled. I believe it is divisive. It has the effect of setting claimants against each other and poses the very real danger that some may miss out, not because they had no legitimate claim, but because the money ran out before the Crown got round to dealing with them.
In budgets today, you actually have to know how much you're spending. I don't believe that we would have been able as a government to settle with Tainui if we hadn't been able to assure Tainui roughly what the amount of taxpayer money was that we were going to spend in the whole settlement process. And this is going to be the difficulty, because if we don't have a ballpark figure, as the fiscal envelope has been, then people say, well, so-and-so got such and such, therefore we should get twice as much. And they get a little bit more, and then it goes back and the first ones want to renegotiate. And you never settle those grievances if you don't actually say, hey, there has to be a limit to this, and this is the field in which we're working. And I think that the government's response there has been far more responsible than saying, no, it's an open checkbook and we'll just see how it evolves. Because really, you will never finish the process if you have no limits on it.
This is what we're thinking of fiscal envelope.
Māoridom rejected National's plans to settle all Māori claims for $1 billion by the end of the century. New Zealand First would scrap that and negotiate over a longer period.
We should be putting aside money in a land or a financial bank, a reservoir, to make those settlements painlessly as and when they arise over the next 20, 30, 40 years.
There is no limit on the taxpayers' funding to settle treaty grievances. What is your response to that?
Well, I think that will unsettle New Zealand First's older supporters, and I'd be surprised that they've actually taken that as a mandate from the wider New Zealand First support base.
However, this week, Winston Peters went all out for the Māori vote, launching the New Zealand First Māori policies at the Ratana Marae in Whanganui. New Zealand First wants more direct help for Māori. They would set up agencies to target Māori health, education, employment and training, a Māori apprenticeship scheme and marae-based work schemes for young unemployed.
It's really flying in the face of the partnership approach that we've taken and the mainstreaming approach, which I believe is now starting to deliver some real benefits to Māori around New Zealand. So I'd be a bit concerned to see what appears to be a very backward step. Alternatively, it could be considered to be a very radical step, depending on just what New Zealand First is talking about with this separate agency approach.
There was strong support for Jim Anderton this week from Māori candidates at the Alliance Party campaign launch in Auckland.
We have to restore to New Zealanders trust in the political process and in their political leadership.
And to win over the Māori trust, a commitment from Alliance to treaty settlements.
We've already announced that each year we will put up $200 million to advance the settlements under the Treaty of Waitangi Tribunal. That itself, the tribunal itself needs to be beefed up to have the resources to deal with these claims, because the sooner we get the claims dealt with and get on, that'll be better for Maori to Manpakia.
This is John Carter country, the sitting MP for the Northland electorate. An electorate with an enrolment population of 34,000. Of those, 15% or 5,000 are Māori. Previous enrolment figures show that nationwide, Māori voters are split 50-50 between both the Māori and general roles. That ratio is also reflected in the number of Māori candidates contesting both Māori and general seats. Nationwide, there are 46 Māori candidates contesting the 5 Māori seats, and almost an equal number contesting the general seats, the highest being here in the Northland electorate, where there are 3 Māori candidates.
Labour candidate for Northland, Peter Pangari. He left here to join the army. Today, he's back with a vision for the future.
I want a health system that is about people and not profit. A plan for education that provides opportunity for the future, and an economy that delivers jobs.
We're talking about 80% of our kids are not academic, that when they leave school, they fall into the cracks. They leave school with absolutely nothing. I believe we can have a system where there is a continuation of education, where there is a continuation of some form of trade training within the school, but I do believe that integrated with that should be a polytech system that is with part and parcel to that college or that high school.
The New Zealand First candidate for Northland, Ron Peters, stood for Hobson at the last elections.
Cool, Ron. Yeah, that's the rugby.
Good, we're talking about rugby, not politics here.
Rugby only.
Rugby, like politics, is a full-time job for the party leader's younger brother. Both brothers ended up in politics, Winston in Parliament and the younger Ron in NZRFU in 1985. Today he's chairman for Northern Māori Rugby.
For example, in health, we are totally opposed to the modern system, and that any medical institution in place as of election date will not be closed. We're saying that for education purposes, any student leaving high school, going to a polytech or university or other institution which is registered, they'll be entitled to a living allowance on the same rate as the present dole, irregardless of your parents' income. And because we know that's affordable.
Kevin Prime is contesting the Northland seat as the member for Progressive Greens with an impeccable track record.
You know, I've got 13 children and I manage all of them pretty well. I've got just over about 700 hectares of pine forest. I run about 350 head of cattle on the place. I'm part of the Bay of Islands College Board of Trustees, been chairman of that for the last 10 years. I've managed that pretty well, no problems. I've been on several health committees. I've been on about 4 ministerial advisory committees to do with conservation, to do with health, to do with Māori land development, and still with the Ngā Whenua Rāhui committee. And all of them I handle no problem.
Kevin Prime is also a businessman, which he feels is essential in today's corporate world of politics.
I think when I took over this farm, it was worth about $10,000. It's worth about $5 million now. So by anyone's stretch of the imagination, that should be a reasonable increase in the value of the asset.
We've seen 3 Māori candidates contesting 1 general electorate in the far north. Now we go south and meet 2 candidates contesting general seats in Palmerston North and Hutt South. In both electorates, 6% of the voters are Māori.
National candidate for Palmerston North, George Matthews. Politically, George Matthews sits to the right of centre. This ex-lieutenant colonel believes that we should take responsibility for our own lives.
My focus really is selling the good news story of National, the achievements of the last 6 years. And in fact, some of our achievements, of course, was on the back of a previous Labor government. And we do acknowledge that. The difficulty is that the current Labor administration really want to go back. And I'm fairly determined that I will do my best to make sure that they're not given the opportunity to do that.
On the campaign trail supporting George, a husband and wife team standing for National, the Te Heu family.
So many of our people are on the general roll, In fact, in some of the centres, there are more of our people on a general role than there are on the Māori role. So I think it's important that those on the general role have got a choice.
Joining us in the studio this morning is from the Alliance Party, Peter Love. Good morning, Peter. Welcome to the show.
Peter Love, if he gets in, is determined to decriminalise the use of cannabis.
I want to keep them out of jail. And therefore, if this drug, this minor drug, is going to cause them to go into jail in such large numbers, then we have to change the law to regulate that situation much better than we're doing at the moment. People are tired of the other two parties, tired and really want a change for the better. Alliance Party, of course, is the only party that's offering free health and free education, so we're ahead of everybody else on that. But I also think we're ahead on the fact that our social policy and the condition of the lower socioeconomic groups in this country are such that change will be made at the ballot box this time.
A week out, Marae broadcasts a special pre-election program with candidates from the four main political parties, each contesting a Māori seat, responding to viewers' concerns.
E ngā mana, ngā reo, ngā kārangaranga maha, huri noi tō tātou motu, tēnā nō koutou katoa. Kia ora moko.
Kia ora, Derek.
Hea tō mahi tēnei wiki.
Taumaha katoa aku mahi tēnei wiki.
Kāti te rupa.
Engari, te pō te tai te haere ki te pōwhaka ngahau, mo te pepe a hene wehi a hene rau ka tauri.
Kei te pehe tēnā.
Paera watu te nuinga o ngā Māori i reira. Engari i reira hoki a pop, tērā mea.
Pop, kia ora. It's a nice suit.
Kia
ora. Kia ora.
Kia kaha.
Kia ora. Kia ora rā koutou. Kia ora rā koutou e huri mai ana ki tēnei wāhanga. Koutou hoki e noho ana i roto i ngā kāinga. Huri no tō tātou whenua. Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou. Kia ora mai ana tātou katoa. Now, the big election question on everybody's lips isn't about Helen Clark's hair or Winston's toe or Jim Bolger's worm. No. The thing everybody is talking about is the coalition, eh? Aye, because they're all being a bit cagey about who's going to join up with who. Ho haya. You know, you think these fellas would know each other well enough to know by now, or, you know, to come to some sort of agreement, ne? I mean, Jim Bolger and Winston have met over the odd wine box, haven't they? But this coalition's like a form of marriage, ne? You know, the ritual of marriage has got three distinctive stages. First, there's the engagement ring, then there's the wedding ring, and of course after that comes the suffering. But right now, all these politicians, are at what you might call the courting stage. They keep threatening to take each other to court out. But this is the time when everybody looks at everybody else to see what kind of partner they will make. So nobody wants to make up their mind until they find out how big a say they're going to get in running the house. Well, I can't blame them, I suppose. But, you know, after all the votes are counted, they're going to have to decide, ne? I suppose, it'll be a bit like my marriage, ne? Oh, it was a very touching occasion. Papa I te aroha, ne? Even the cake was in tears. But, you know, there's a spark of hope, because most weddings are happy. It's the living together afterwards that can be a bit blinking difficult, ne? Ah, well, I hope those fellows know what they're doing. Ka kite anō. Kia ora.
Well, kia ora, Pop. Well, we're in the home straight now for the elections with one more week to go. And as we promised, we've invited the four main parties, National, Labour, Alliance and New Zealand First, to send along a candidate who's contesting a Māori seat to our marae to respond to concerns you've phoned in or faxed to us. And they have. From Labour, we have Joe Hawke. Joe standing in the Tai Tokero seat for Labour. He's 55 and a company director and a trustee for the Ngāti Whātua Runanga. Joe is, of course, Ngāti Whātua and is probably best known for leading the occupation of Bastion Point nearly 20 years ago. Tai Tokero used to be a safe Labour seat until it was won by Tau Henare 3 years ago. His majority is a slender 758. Kia ora, Joe.
Kia ora.
Hone Kaiwai is Ngāti Pro and the Alliance candidate for Te Taitonga. He's 51. He's a manager for a social service provider. Now, I realise, like all the Māori electorates, that the boundaries for Te Taitonga have changed dramatically, but the seat has been in the Tirikatene family for many decades. The present incumbent is Whetu Tirikatene Sullivan. She has a majority of more than 3,200. Kia ora, Hone.
Kia ora.
Tahuna Minhinik is from Ngāti Te Ata of Tainui and is a national candidate for Te Taihoauru, the seat previously held by Koro Wetere, who's retiring this year. Tahuna is 35 years old and is the director of a health and fitness centre. Last time round, Koro won the seat with a majority of over 3,000. Kia ora, Tahuna. And also standing in the western seat is Tukurorangi Morgan. He's also from Ngāti Te Ata and Ngāti Mahuta and is the New Zealand First candidate. Tuku's 38 and a journalist. At the last election, he helped Tau Henare to win the northern seat. This time, he's having a go himself. Kia ora, Tuku.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Deb.
Well, shortly we'll be back to put some of your concerns to our four candidates, but before then, here's Hone Edwards with a report on the special poll we commissioned of Māori voters.
In the last month, we've been bombarded with results from several opinion polls predicting the ever-changing fortunes of political parties and their leaders. Opinions randomly selected from New Zealand voters. But when was the last time you heard about an opinion poll specifically targeting Māori voters? We believe there has never been such a poll until now. Here at the Political Science Department of Waikato University, mainly Māori academic researchers have been recruited to carry out the first ever national Māori opinion poll for election 96.
If an election were held today, which party would you vote for?
If an election were held today, which party would you vote for?
The Waikato University Political Science Department's New Survey Research Unit polled 650 Māori on both the Māori and general rolls, the margin of error plus or minus 3.8%. New Zealand First is the most popular party with 46% of Māori voters. 54% of those on the Māori roll will vote New Zealand First on the party list, compared to 39% of Māori on the general roll. Jim Bolger is the least wanted leader to 58% of Māori. And the most preferred Prime Minister is Winston Peters.
People are looking at the leader of the New Zealand First Party, at Winston Peters, and his personality is coming through. Māori are attracted to that.
The survey asked, if you were voting in a general election held today, what political issue would be most important to you personally when making your decision? Health and education are the most important issues for Māori, and while the economy is third for the general public and the Herald Waikato University poll, for Māori it's unemployment.
Unemployment for the general population has come down to just on 6%. 6.1% was a very recent statistic that came out. But unemployment for Māori to date is currently hovering around 14.4, nearly 15%. So that's basically saying that unemployment for Māori is nearly 3 times higher than the non-Māori population. It's a considerable issue for Māori relative to the non-Māori population.
The age group where there's high unemployment is 18 to 49. They have strongly supported New Zealand First, whose policy states you must get community-based work to be eligible for welfare benefits.
The two definitely don't go together. Their health issue and policies have not been clearly articulated. Their health policy appears to be similar to the Labour Party health policy, but still not as explicit as the Labour Party policy. So there's nothing in the health policy. The education policy, they have said that they will try and reduce the teacher-pupil ratio in primary education, and that they may introduce a little bit more funding into primary education. But there's really nothing that they're saying about education that is as to answer why would Māori go for New Zealand First education policy.
While all age groups strongly support New Zealand First, the bulk is in the 50-plus age group.
The 50-plus people appear to be supporting Winston Peters because of his personality. It can't be because of the superannuation policies, because the superannuation policies of the New Zealand First Party are not really going to benefit Māori. For example, Winston is talking about removing the tax on savings. Most Māori who have retired will not have enough savings that would have gained a surtax anyway. And the second issue is that Winston is also talking about a compulsory superannuation saving. Well, Māori out in the workforce, a large number of them, are only just able to make ends meet and cope with day-to-day living. They're not able to put money aside to save, but Winston is talking about a compulsory tax. Basically, it's a compulsory tax. More money will be coming out of their pocket. So that doesn't, one wonders why the 50 plus would be going for the New Zealand First Party on that.
And while Winston Peters is miles out in front, its support are not built on policies that will necessarily benefit Māori. And in the last week leading up to the elections, Māori voters may be looking for change.
It's definitely a personality issue, but I would be surprised if Helen Clark's support didn't increase this coming week. Helen Clark's support just in the last week has started to move up, and I think that the polls now are going to show with the New Zealand population, both Māori and non-Māori, increased support for Helen Clark. I think it will rise in the next week.
As this poll illustrates, the Māori vote is influenced by personality and not policy. However, Anne Sullivan believes an informed vote could make a difference for Māori in Parliament.
The survey is very significant. We have never had a comprehensive survey of Māori voters before. This is the very first, so we cannot make comparisons where Māori were voting in the past, what they were going to do. But we make up nearly 15% of the total population. We are voting in large numbers, and we can make a difference in the electoral system and who we get into Parliament. It's really important for us to get our people enrolled, it's important for us to get our people out and voting, and we can make a difference. And I think that after next Saturday, we're going to see probably 15, 17 Maori MPs in Parliament, and they're going to make a difference. They're going to have a Māori agenda. They'll have an influence in New Zealand politics.
Okay, well, before we get into the issues, perhaps we should have a quick response to that particular poll and those results. Tuku, New Zealand First comes out pretty well over there, but there's some suggestion that it's a personality vote, not necessarily one driven by policy.
Well, I have to say that the reason why there's growing support for New Zealand First is because our people are sick and tired of being betrayed by the National Party and the Labour Party. And that's mirrored in the fact that state-owned enterprises in this country, to the tune of $16.6 billion, have been hocked off by people that they believed, and our people believed in the Labour Party to represent the ordinary working class.
Okay, yeah, so you're quite happy with the present poll?
I am not surprised that we are doing well. We will do much better than Anne Sullivan suggests.
Okay. Tahana, doesn't look so good there for National. Jim Bolge is the least preferred Prime Minister. Also, National polls very poorly in that particular poll in the Māori seats. Any response to that?
Well, I think it's just it is a personality thing, and as the issues start to come forward, I think there'll be a lot of changes in that poll. If you were to run one, say, 2 or 3 days from now, after we have this discussion, I'm sure that the policies I announced today will show a big rise in National's profile and New Zealand First decline.
Hornick, what's your response?
Yeah, I think there'll be significant change over the next week. I think it is a personality thing. I think there are a lot of policies that New Zealand First haven't made commitments to Māori with, and I think they're still sitting on the fence. I think when those are exposed up until the 11th of October, I think people will then realise where the strengths for Māori will lie.
Joe, Winston Peters and New Zealand First are well ahead, but Helen Clark's, coming up there. So
well, I'm very confident in the last week that the drawback to Labour is going to be enormous, and I'm hoping that the Māori support for Labour and for Helen Clark, they will return back in their droves to the historical home and back to Labour.
The day after the election, Marae took a look at the Māori electorate results and the Māori list MPs who made it into Parliament.
Kia ora Derek, e rā whakahirahira pē tēnei mō tātou.
Ai, tēnā koe, hone e tiwi, tēnā rā wātu koutou katoa. E hone ka mau te wehi o tēnei whakataitai pōtsu.
Ka mau te wehi.
Well, Hone, we have quite a program this morning. This morning we're celebrating the highest number of Māori ever to make it into the New Zealand Parliament. 15 provisionally on the overnight results. There's 1 for National, provisionally 4 for Labour, 7 for New Zealand First, 2 for the Alliance and 1 for ACT. In the Māori seats, there's been a radical shift from Labour to New Zealand First. But let's take a look at the menu for today.
In a moment, we'll have a quick roundup of what happened last night, and Derek will talk to Dr. Anne Sullivan, political scientist from Waikato University.
We've had a team of reporters on the road yesterday and overnight in the Māori electorates, and we'll be seeing the fruits of their labour. And we'll be back again to talk to Dr. Anne Sullivan about the way Māori have voted.
Pop will be popping in to give us his view on things.
And we'll take a closer look at this idea of a Māori caucus in the New Zealand Parliament to see if it holds any water.
To kick off our election special this morning, here's Kirsty Babington with an overview of what happened on election night.
With final results still coming through, it's unclear who will actually govern the country. What's clear, however, is that New Zealand First will hold the balance of power, or what Winston Peters is calling the balance of responsibility. New Zealand First has won all 5 Māori seats, therefore a coalition with Labour is more than likely. However, Winston Peters is playing his cards pretty close to his chest.
I will be announcing a negotiating team led by myself to develop the first ever MMP coalition government. And we'll be seeking political and economic stability, the best interests of our country, real solutions to the outstanding social problems that bedevil us. Beyond that, it's not my intention or the intention of New Zealand First to comment any further upon any negotiating talks until there is positive progress and a settled conclusion.
Labour, who needs to form a coalition to govern, will have to woo New Zealand First.
We always knew that under proportional representation we could not do it on our own. We knew we would need to work with other people to forge a majority for change in the Parliament. And I believe the people have spoken today that they want that change, and I will do my best to see that it happens.
Early this morning, according to the votes counted, this is how it shaped up. A pretty good indication of what we could expect. National would have the largest number, with 44. United is expected to have 1 seat. ACT would have 8 seats, with New Zealand First holding the balance of power with 17. Alliance has ended with only 13, and Labour fills the rest, 37 seats. National, as we've seen, has the highest number of seats in Parliament, but not enough to command a majority. Clearly, however, Jim Bolger isn't ready to give up on the possibility of governing the country as Prime Minister, even with a minority.
We have the possibility of either a minority government or a coalition majority government, depending on which way people move over the next few years, over the next few weeks, rather.
But the possibility of a minority government may be narrowed if the Māori seat winners influence which direction New Zealand First will take. The Māori MPs are tau henare en te tai tokerau, en te tai hauauru Tukurorangi Morgan, en tai rāwhiti John Delamere, en te puku o te whenua Rana Waitai, and in te tai tonga Tutikawa Wailei. With that landslide, Winston Peters is in a good position to choose which way he'll go.
Well, it's not a matter. This party kept its options open because we want the principles we stand for to become the focus of the future government. That's why we had to keep our options open, and today we're in this unique position.
Māori too are in a unique position. There are now more Māori in Parliament than ever before. 15 in total, 9 of whom are from party lists, and of course Winston Peters winning tauranga. A coalition announcement is not expected for at least 2 weeks, and intense behind-doors negotiations will be going on to decide who, at least in the meantime, will be governing the country. Helen Clark is counting on former Māori allegiances to Labour to pull her party through.
I believe that Māori have voted for a change of government, and I certainly would hope that those new Māori MPs who come in from New Zealand First would be looking to the kind of policy change a Labour-led government can bring to be in the best interests of their people.
Well, that's the way it was in the Māori electorates on election night. Political scientist Anne Sullivan joins me now to analyse the trends in Māori vote. And Anne, our Marae Waikato University poll was absolutely accurate.
It was bang on, Hone, and the predictions that were put forward with your poll have come through very clearly.
Now, is this a dissatisfied Labour vote or thumbs up for New Zealand First policy?
I think this is a new era of Māori politics. Māori politics are moving ahead. Economically, we're moving ahead, and they're saying to the political arena, we're here, take notice of us, and we're moving forward.
Now, if we were to look at the party vote by roll in our opinion poll, 54% of those on the Māori roll it was predicted that they would vote for New Zealand First, and they did.
That's right. They've been hurt by, as I said earlier, they've been hurt by Labour and National. And also, the poll also showed that a substantial number of people over the age of 50, more predominantly the over 50s, were going to go for New Zealand First, and that's come through. They've given New Zealand First a clear mandate.
And what is your analysis there? Because that's quite a surprising result, that the 50-plus are voting for a party, in effect, prior to the elections, their superannuation policy, as you said last week, wasn't really conducive to Māori in that age group.
We need to do some more work in this area, Hone, and we need to get out and talk to our people. But very clearly, they like to see a man like Winston Peters there battling the establishment. They have liked the looks of the candidates that Winston put forward and put very high up on his list. They do like the go-ahead nature of the candidates. And Winston, of course, said, first off, that he would go to the people and ask the people themselves who he should be putting forward. He did that, and the people have delivered. Now we've got to see New Zealand First delivering back to the Māori people.
In fact, we will look at the party vote by age group in that poll, right across the board, all age groups prior to the election said that they would come out and vote for New Zealand First. Now, whatever the coalition, can New Zealand First deliver to Māori people?
I think they have to be very careful as to how they deliver. Their social policies are much more in line with Labour, and so therefore probably we will see them pushing forward on education, on health issues particularly.
Unemployment was high on the list of priorities. In our opinion poll, it was number 3. Are we going to be able to alleviate this problem under a coalition, with whatever the coalition that New Zealand First decides to fit into?
I think what was interesting about your poll with the unemployment figures, that it was much more important for Māori men than it was for Māori women. 2/3 more Māori men saw that as a priority. 2/3 of Māori women saw issues like education and health being a priority. So the unemployment issue, Labour is going to, the Labour coalition would try and move on that, but down to 14% from a high of 28% 3 years ago, I'm not sure, because New Zealand First has not articulated strong policies for unemployed or the unemployed. They haven't really come up with too many job schemes.
And in the issue of health and education, they were the top 2 issues on the list. Do you think that they'll be able to deliver on this to Māori voters and address the concerns?
I think they'll be trying. They have certainly been very critical of the health policy of the national government. On education, we may see a little more movement, but I think that at the end of the day, that some of the social policies, I'm sure, the response will be that they're being dealt with within mainstream society. New Zealand First has not said at any point that it will specifically target Māori as a separate group of people.
And kia ora, thanks for joining us this morning.
Kia ora, hone.
Our political scientist for Decision 96, Anne Sullivan, with the way Māori voted. But what does it all mean? Well, Pop was in the kauta last night watching the elections, and he's here this morning with a more pragmatic view.
Kia ora rā koutou ngaranga tira, kia ora rā koutou katoa, me koutou e noho noho ana I roto I ngā kāinga. Tēnā koutou, kia ora mai ana tātou katoa. Well, MMP, ne? Well, you know, to me it's a bit of a mixed blessing, ne? There's good news and bad news, eh? The good news is there's more Māori in Parliament than ever. And the bad news is there's more Pākehā in Parliament than ever. Now, there's a lot of talk now around these days about the Maori caucus. Now, it seems the idea is all those Maori MPs ought to get together and take off their party hats and put on their Maori pōtai, ne? Look, you know, get together to promote the interests of Māori. Now, sounds like a good idea, ngari. A lot of people think tātou te iwi Māori have trouble coming to agreements. Ah, nothing wrong with that. Who says we've got to agree all the time anyway? Besides that, you see, boy, it's a lot harder for us. Well, you put 3 Pākehā in a room, and you know you're going to get 3 different opinions, ne? Because they all look after number 1, boy. But you put 3 Māori in a room, you got 2 iwi, a dozen hapu, and hundreds of whānau, and that's just tauhenare. You know, and it's going to be hard for all those Māori MPs disagreeing with their party bosses, ne? Because those parties got a heck of a lot of different promises to break. You know, to me, tēnei mea te Parliament, it's a bit like a marae committee up home, you know. We had a hui last week and we were discussing the new wharekai. Oh boy, what a hoha. You know, is it going to be electric or are we cooking with gas? Shall we have a dishwasher or do you expect me to do it? Or are we going to buy those Ginsu knives there? Boy, meantime, we're still eating takeaways. So my advice, ne, to those Māori MPs is this. Kia kaha, fix your eye on the big picture and don't get sidetracked. And boy, get close to the real source of power, ne, the wharekai. If I were you, I'd be keeping a good close eye on the kitchen staff at Bellamy's, ne? And when they've got rotten corn as soup of the day in the beehive, then I know you're on the right track, boy. Ah, well, I suppose you fellas know what you're doing. Kia ora mai na tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Well, kia ora again, and in the studio with me this morning is Dr. Anne Sullivan from Waikato University. Kia ora, Anne. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Well, pretty much as you predicted in the Māori seats, but what about overall? What's the position overall as you see it?
Oh, the position overall, Māori have sent a very clear message in this election to all political parties. Māori have turned out and voted solidly for New Zealand First, and they have said to the political parties, we want a Māori people in Parliament who will achieve, and they have got a very strong group of achievers in Parliament. They have not got people who are in Parliament because of political patronage or whakapapa or those sort of traditional links. They have got people in Parliament that are sending a clear message that we want to move ahead, we want to take control, and this is how we're going to do it with very good young people.
On election night, we've seen that there are provisionally 15 Māori in Parliament. That could change, and it'll come down rather than go up. What's your hunch as to how that drift might go?
I don't think it's going to go down very much at all. I think we're going to see around about 15. There's a possibility if Whetū Tirakani Sullivan was to pick up on the special votes, then the Tariana may very well drop off the Labour list, but that seems to be the only one. Except, and I think we need to realise in the 5 Māori seats that in the last election, in 3 of those Māori electorates, nearly half of those votes that go for that the Māori people put in are special. So we have still got in 3 seats nearly 50% of votes to come in yet.
Okay, I guess around the country people are looking and they're saying, here we are, National's got 40-something seats, Labour's got 30-something. How or when, what's the process you expect to go through now before we'll see who in fact will govern the country? Because clearly Jim Bolger's not giving it away. He thinks he could still do it in some way or other.
That could take quite a while. There's a lot of discussion and negotiation that has to take place, and Winston Peters and his party are the key players in that, and they may very well take quite a bit of time. Constitutionally, they've got up to nearly 8 weeks before a parliament must be formed, and I think that it will take quite a bit of time.
What's your hunch as to which way Winston might ultimately end up going, or what are the factors that will determine that?
If you look at the way Māori have voted, they have given Winston a clear mandate with the Māori vote, and Māori only gave the National Party 5% of the total Māori vote. They do not want to see Winston Peters go with the National Party, and the social policies of the New Zealand First Party are more in line or closer to the Labour Party. Maybe the only sticking point will be the Employment Contracts Act, because New Zealand First have said that they would probably more just tinker with it, rather than the Labour Party has said that they will scrap the Employment Contract Act. So that may be a sticking point, but on social policies, they're much closer to Labour. But economically, their economic policies are very close to national, but I think that it would put Winston in a difficult position if he was to line with the National Party, because Māori clearly do not want national.
Well, if we look at that, if we look at in the seats last night, of the 153, nearly 153,500 votes cast, only 2,500 yet again went to national. So that's clearly, and they're not looking towards national, are they?
They're not looking towards national, and Labour has taken a 22% drop in the Māori vote. Since 1984, National and Labour have really hurt Māori people substantially, and by the looks of it, they're not prepared to put up with it any longer, and they're going for a new breed of politician.
How significant is this sort of scenario? Here we have New Zealand First. The only seats that it's won outright have been won by Māori. We have Winston Peters plus the 5. Māori have given New Zealand First 43% of the vote that they've achieved has been Māori vote, and that was last night. It could well go up. Is it likely then that there's going to be a lot of pressure that Māori want to go to the best deal, and that's something that he has to take a note of?
I think it's very interesting with the New Zealand First getting those 5 Māori electorate seats, because those 5 Māori are going to have the most flexibility of the 14 or 15 Māori that we have in Parliament, because they are answerable first and foremost to their electorate rather than the party. So if the party moves away from issues that the Māori and the electorates want to see them put in place, then those 5 Māori MPs have far more flexibility. They could even go independent if they disagreed with party policy, because the people have put them there.
Now here's Kirsty Babington again with an update on the Māori MPs.
So who are they? Who are the Māori that have made it, and what are their political ties? Perhaps the biggest lesson is that Labour can no longer take the Māori vote for granted. New Zealand First knocked Labour off its pedestal in Te Tai Tokerau, with Tau Hinare keeping his seat, beating Labour's Joe Hawke by 5,775 votes. Tuku Roirangi Morgan didn't have to rely on his New Zealand First list ranking to get into Parliament. He too beat off a Labour rival, his majority 2,874 votes. In the Tairāwhiti electorate, perhaps the biggest upset, former Speaker of the House and MP since 1981 Peter Tapsell was defeated by newcomer John Delamere. Te Puku o Te Whenua was always going to be a hard one to pick, but with a clear majority of 1,505, law enforcer Rana Waitai scooped the seat. And finally, Te Taitonga, the most hotly contested seat, may still change once special votes are counted. Te Kaiwa Wailea had a small lead of 153 votes this morning over Whetu Tirikatani Sullivan. As well as the 5 Māori seats, 10 other Māori will sit in the new MMP Parliament. Donna Awatiri Huata from ACT, Alliance's Sandra Lee, who lost her seat to Labour's Judith Tizard, Alamane Korpu, also of the Alliance. Labour has the next highest number of Māori MPs after New Zealand First, Dover Samuels from Te Tai Tokerau, Nanaia Mahuta of Tainui, Joseph Hawke of Ngāti Whātua, and Tariana Turia, who's based in Whanganui. Georgina Te Hehu was always guaranteed a seat as she was number 7 on the National Party's list. New Zealand First also has one successful list candidate, Ron Mark, and of course Winston Peters, who won Tauranga.
Well, sitting patiently in the studio for the last half hour or so are a group of people who have every right to be excited this morning as they begin their term as members of Parliament for this country's first MMP government. We have with us today John Delamere, who's the new Member of Parliament for Te Tairawhiti, Joe Hawke, who has made it in on the list for Labour, Tau Henare, who beat him in Northern and has retained his seat, Georgina, who has really been a Member of Parliament for some time now, really. It was a reality that you were going to get in. She's the only National Party member, Māori member. We have Sandra Lee, who's off the list for the Alliance, Rana Waitai, who's taken the new seat, Te Puko Te Whenua, and of course we have Donna Awatere, who has made it in off the list.
Awatere huata, Derek.
Okay.
Kia ora tātou, everyone.
Who has made it in off the list for ACT. I know a lot of people have been up fairly late last night and feeling a bit weary, but I wonder if we could just look at some of the trends that happened and try and look at what might happen in the future. Now, Joe, I suppose, being the Labour member here, there's been a dramatic turn away from Labour. What do you put that down to?
Well, the people have spoken and they've really shifted in block. My role in the MMP environment is to bring the concerns of my supporters and the Labour Party supporters to mix with the members that are selected, and I congratulate every member here today.
There's a famous statement of a Prime Minister in the 50s saying to the Labour contender at the time, I'll give you 4 blacks, and it was guaranteed that you were going to get the 4 Māori seats. That's long gone now, isn't it?
Well, MMP widens the corridor in the political system, and as we see now, there are 14 or 15 Māori. This is encouraging for Māori to participate in the political system for our country.
I suppose one thing that begs the question is, if Māori have turned their back on Labour, is Labour likely to turn its back on Māori? What's going to be the view, do you think, amongst your colleagues?
Not while I'm there. I'll represent the views of the Māori constituents that supported me in Te Taitokerau. And as a MP on MMP, I will be bringing the best views and the best policies for the benefit of my people.
Georgina, you've got a reasonably lonely sort of position there in the National Party. I mean, although one has to say that they decided from the outset they wanted you there by putting you so high up on the list. Given that, again, Māori have turned, they're not voted, in fact it's the party they least voted for in the Māori seats in particular. What sort of role do you expect to play in the National Party now?
The same role that motivated me to stand for that party, and that's basically to ensure that there's a strong Māori presence there, strong Māori voice, and I don't feel at all lonely, and especially not sitting here this morning with colleagues that we have. So, yeah.
Sandra, you lost Auckland Central, but again, there was this element that, OK, we can get 2 women into Parliament here, and so that's some comfort you can draw. But the Alliance, too, didn't do that great in the Māori seats. What do you put that down to?
Well, we got double the amount that the National Party did, and given the resources and the fact that we didn't have a Māori seat at all to begin with, I don't think that the performance was too bad. Having said that, we have a lot of cause for celebration, and we're sitting amongst it here. Our people have come through, and I think our people know better than most people that the labels don't mean as much as the aroha, the wairua, and the direction. And as Tau, I'm sure, can confirm, having been 2 of our generation in Parliament quite alone for the last 3 years, this looks pretty good to us.
Rana, you had a brand new seat, Te Puko Te Whenua, very big seat. While you were moving around there in the last week or so, did you have a feeling that you might be successful?
Yes, certainly, Denny. But that feeling's been around for probably about a month now. The chickens are really coming home to roost for Labour, and that was becoming very apparent. I think, Labour's put up some pretty good, straight, honest people over the years, but they've been strangled by their party line, and they were unable to be effective. So it wasn't really their fault, it was the system, the political system they're trying to operate in, and the chickens just came home to roost.
Well, Donna, I mean, ACT is not one of those parties that Māori flock to, but nevertheless, because of the...
Give me 3 years, Derek.
Because of the list arrangement, you've got into Parliament. What are you hoping to do in that position?
Well, the first thing I want to say, Derek, is I have to thank my honey of a husband, hi darling, because he'd be so pleased to see me here today. I think my role in Parliament is going to be to ensure that Māori policies get priority in the centre-right, if it is in opposition or if it is in government, whichever. I think I see myself working very closely with the Māori caucus, in particular with Georgina, to ensure that those of our colleagues on our side of the line, if you like, are aware of Māori issues, and I think that we've got a fight on our hands, but I think that the number of us together here, I mean 15 MPs, this is an extraordinary outcome for Māoridom and one that we're already celebrating.
John, you had a pretty high mountain to climb. You had to knock off the Speaker of the House and someone who'd been in Parliament for 15 or so years. Did you have that same feeling that Rana's talking about, that New Zealand First was going to come through?
Very much so. The feeling was coming through months and months ago, and that Māori want very visible and very audible representation, and for whatever reason, you know, it hasn't happened for a long time, other than Tau. Tau got elected last time, and he has been by far and away the most audible and visible Māori MP in the House, and we, New Zealand First, have reaped the rewards on that, you know, along with Winston.
Well, the chickens came home to roost for Labour. They could also come home to roost for New Zealand First, couldn't they? Because if there's no delivery, how do you see the next 3 years shaping up?
That's right. We've always said right from the outset that all we're asking for is 3 years to try and deliver some of the policies that that we've formulated. So I think that the real hard work, the hard yakka, starts 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
One of the things I want to show you and perhaps talk to you about is that here we are on election night. New Zealand First, of the votes that it secured, 43%, maybe a bit more, maybe up to 45 or so, came from Māori. The only members who got elected in seats were all Māori. Yet, another 11 people got in, only one of whom was Māori, 10 of them are non-Māori. That waters your effort down a little bit, I would have thought.
No, I don't think so. I think it is a reflection of what this country is made up of. It's made up of Māori, it's made up of European, it's made up of a whole lot of people. I think what you've got to look at is that I think we need to pat our constituents on the back. I mean, they've actually taken the bit by the horns and said, right, we're going to go this way. And they're not going to go that way for the next 30 years. We're saying 3 years.
They're going to want a bit more than a pat on the back, though, aren't they?
Oh, they'll definitely receive more than a pat on the back, especially with the calibre of Member of Parliament that we have.
What's the process as you see it now? Here you are, New Zealand First clearly occupies that centre ground. I know it's possible, and Jim Bolger certainly hasn't given it away, the possibility of continuing to govern. But what is the process that you expect to happen over the next few days?
The process, Derek, is quite simple. We will elect from the caucus and from the party a negotiating team, and they will be in constant communication with our caucus in terms of dealing with any negotiations with other political parties. And we want that to be done without the gaze of the media knocking on the back door, knocking on the front door, looking through the windows, so that when we do come up with an agreement, whether it's with National, whether it's with Labour, Alliance, whoever, and then we'll get a public statement out so that the people out there who actually voted for us know what we agreed on. And I think that's fair, that's reasonable, and it's actually going to take a bit of time. It's not going to happen overnight.
I wonder, though, whether, although you say you've got these negotiations to have with people, I wonder if, to a certain extent, at least one hand isn't tied behind your back, because overwhelmingly the people on the Māori roll, and don't forget they've put most of your members into Parliament, they voted against National. How are they going to feel if you then go and cuddle up to National?
Well, those are the figures that we're going to have a look. At. We're not going to just... I mean, I've got my personal views, and most probably everybody in New Zealand First has their personal views, but it doesn't come down to personal views. It actually comes down to, A, what are our policies? B, how did our electorates vote? How did the party vote? Where did the votes come from? All of that information will be taken on board when a decision is made.
A lot of talk about a Māori caucus, but I wonder if it isn't just a pipe dream, because it seems to me that parties get awfully jealous about their membership, and they expect their membership to toe the line. So let's start with you, Joe. What's your feeling on a Māori caucus?
Well, MMP demands that we respect each party that's in a coalition, and we sit down and we put the deals on the table, open,
so that they're transparent, so everybody knows what we're talking about. And for the good of the nation, for the good of the country, we will pick up from the table those things that will benefit the nation, those things that will benefit the elderly people, our tamariki, our mokopuna. And so we will begin to, from tomorrow, 8 o'clock tomorrow, we'll begin to measure the worth of the deals that we have to bring together for the benefit of our people. And I don't see any harm in that.
Donna, your party's clearly going to be looking for some accommodation with National, and for it to be worthwhile for you, you have to be on the Treasury benches. And so what's going to be the sort of view that you will take?
Well, I am committed to the Māori caucus. I believe it's important that we do share so many things. We share a vision for our people, that's for sure. We're all well known to us, all 15 of us. And I think we've all been battling away here for a long time. So the opportunity to work together cannot be given up, because we will share visions and treaty issues, education, health. The way we go about them may be somewhat different, but nevertheless I think it's important to keep the lines of communication open. There will be some borderline issues that I think perhaps Sandra and I will disagree on, but at the end of the day I believe it's important that we keep communicating.
Pipe dream or reality?
Well, I think that Māori have never had the luxury in Parliament of being as ungracious to each other as our Pākehā counterparts. But having said that, let's not mislead our people. MMP is not a cure-all. And I think about people like Dr Michael Cullen in Labour, and I wonder how much he would allow the freedom of MPs who are Māori under Labour to have a dialogue. I think again of National, Richard Prebble, who I know only so well, and even some of the
not as well as me,
Sandra.
Sandra.
Oh, really? Well, we'll see. But some of the press releases from even Winston towards the end of the campaign about our people. So there will always be room, I think, no, let's be straight here.
Yeah,
I think there'll always be room for our people to cooperate and work in the interests of our people. But I don't think we should raise false hopes and say this is an automatic given. The challenge is for us as Māori in Parliament to make sure that we keep the parties that we represent and those who have leading roles in it honest enough to allow that room for movement to advance our people. And that's on us, actually. It's not back with the people, it's with us, and that's a great challenge. So I'm hopeful, but let's get real here. Let's get real time and say that a formal caucus a la the American model, perhaps not. But cooperation, grace and an appreciation of the otherness always was there, and it can continue and get better.
The acid test, Rana. You're going to be back at Te Raka tour. You've got to look poor in the eye. And he says, look, boy, who are you voting for, me or Winston Peters and his mates? Who are you geeing for?
Right, yeah. Well, you know, my first loyalty is to the constituents of the Rohe that voted me in. They voted for New Zealand First. And so my first loyalty is to New Zealand First, and a particular kaupapa that attaches to that. You know, I'm happy to listen to what other people have got to say, what other parties have got to say. But I don't see myself or our party being bound by any other party or their thoughts on the matter. You know, there's a lot of things I'll listen to on that, and I'm happy to do that. But as where my loyalties lie, my loyalties lie out there with the people who elected me and the party that let me stand for it.
John, what's your feeling?
Well, I agree with everything that Rana said, but I think there is an opportunity for us here as Māori. Māori are expecting us to show the way, actually. You know, we're used to working through consensus, and perhaps our, you know, non-Māori colleagues are not particularly used to it. And I think it's a great opportunity here for Māori to actually show Parliament how MMP can really work.
Georgina?
No doubt the leaders of each of our parties will have their thoughts, and that's fine. I also have mine, and no doubt we all do. That is that Māori are, their traditional decision-making is collective, and I would see it unreal if we didn't think we were going to go into Parliament and bring some of that tikanga into Parliament.
I mean, Georgina and I faced death today on your aeroplane.
Listen, one of the things is, of course, that there are at the moment 15 of you. That could change, and it'll probably go down rather than up, depending on how some of the marginal sort of things go. But you see, really, that's what it boils down to. If you wanted to, you could change things in Parliament if you wanted to. But I don't know whether I detect a will here.
I think there's a will there, but I think you're missing the point right from the start. In fact, by actually calling it a caucus, Caucus belongs to party. Okay. So remove the word caucus. The terminology is wrong from the start. Issue by issue, I got no problem working with anybody, black or white, doesn't really matter, as long as there are solutions to the problem. And that's what I mean, a classic example is Sandra and I in the last Parliament, when both of us, totally different parties, sometimes have the greatest of arguments, screaming matches in fact, but we still get on and we still battle away together working on the issues that we agree with.
Okay, well, it's clearly going to be some time before we actually find out who's going to govern the country. I'd like to thank you all for coming in. I know a lot of you have had very late nights. We've had similar sort of thing here. I know some of you are looking forward to flying home. Engari, e te ui huri noa rai tō tātou rohe, kia ora no koutou katoa.
2 months after Election Day, the National Party formed a coalition government with the New Zealand First Party.